And we are live once again on the Metal Voice Metal Panel. Going to do a quick discussion on the legacy of the Madman, or a Madman, legacy of a Madman. With me, Stéphane Giroux. Just came home from breaking news at CTV. Thank you, Stéphane. Also, Anne is right next to him. Maybe she wants to say hi. Salute, Anne. Giles Lavery, almost falling asleep in Germany at 2 a.m.
It is
Aaron
2
Wolfson,
a.m.
Perrin Wolfson, ready to go to sleep.
ready to go to sleep. Legacy of a Madman today. Ozzy Osbourne, very sad that he died at the age of 76. Sorry. We did a show just before with Chris Holmes. He was giving us some stories about, hanging out with Ozzy back in the Lita Ford era when he was married to her, and also he was working with Sharon. Perrin, Stefan, Giles, I'm going to let Perrin start things off. We've already talked about Black Sabbath and the Ozzy Osbourne era. Perrin, just tell me a little bit about Ozzy as a solo artist, where what is that legacy? What does that mean? And we're talking about from the music to the character that he was on stage, or maybe he wasn't a character, that was his real personality, to sometimes the drunk,
Well, look, Ozzy was iconic. My mother knows who Ozzy Osbourne is. My mother is calling me to check in to see if I'm okay and how I'm feeling. So, I mean, we could put Dio up on a pedestal. We can point to lots of people who left metal bands and had successful careers within our niche. But Ozzy left arguably the biggest heavy metal band in the world, though not at their high point, or got fired from them. Started a solo career, surrounded himself by great people, and became even more iconic. And how many people can you say that about? Was Freddie Mercury's solo endeavors a success? No. Was Mick Jagger a huge solo success? Like I said, we talk about Dio and people like that, but that's within our metal niche. David Lee Roth, kind of, okay, headlined arenas, but for a short time. There's no figure in hard rock heavy metal who I can think of who left or was fired from a band with the status of Black Sabbath, took a pause, and then came back and made himself into something even bigger than what he had been before. He's one of the few people that's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice with Black Sabbath and as a solo artist, and you can't argue with it. You can't argue with it. It's like Stevie Nicks level. It's those kind of, it's Eric Clapton level. It's those. That's the level we're talking about
very,
here. Like,
very well said, Perrin. Before Giles, I know he drifts off. Giles, you heard Ozzy Osbourne died just a few hours ago. I was like, what was going through your head?
One thing that it's obviously needless to say, um, heavy metal world has lost probably one of the, if not the most iconic artist. It does remind us of the passing of time. It's we are getting this music is disappearing, or the founding fathers are disappearing, and the music they made will obviously live forever. But we are getting to the end of an era. Today might have been it. You know what I mean. The music will live on. This type of music will be played by younger people, obviously, but we are reaching the absolute final chapter of an era, in real time. You know what I'm saying? So it does hit. When it's someone like Eddie Van Halen, when it's someone like Ozzy, Dio was very untimely. One would have thought he had another, decade ahead of him uh, when he passed. John Lord was significant, but they all are. But this is like Jimmy Page level. This is Robert Plant level. This is Mick Jagger level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very, very well said, Stefan.
I think
You go ahead.
what makes Ozzy so exceptional is that when he was finally ousted from the band, from Black Sabbath for good, 78, 79, it's a bit, he was considered too washed up. to continue with Sabbath. Don Arden, I think, said there's nothing to do with this guy. He can't do anything. He was never a writer of music or lyrics. And most people said, he should not even be living. I had the pleasure of seeing the first solo tour of Blizzard of Oz here in Montreal in 1981. I thought, okay, he's interesting. I'd never seen him with Sabbath. But what I find amazing is that his second career was not supposed to happen. The guy was washed up. There was no way you could even hope for a second career for this guy. And the fact, thanks to his wife, mind you, ironically, Don Arden's daughter, she was able to reinvent him and do a lot more than reviving just the singer from Black Sabbath. She invented a new character to a new audience that probably didn't even know Black Sabbath from the 70s, to the point where he outsold his former band, outperformed his older band. And I think this is what sets him apart. Sir Robert Plant had a great career after Led Zeppelin, but it was never Led Zeppelin level, so you have to look at it this way, that this was a second career that was not even supposed to happen. And then you had his third career as a TV star, The Osbournes. I thought, okay, this is cheesy, but I thought, now, a reality show involving a rock star. What a concept. Milk him a few there. And then have a few reunion shows with Black Sabbath to reconcile the 70s band with the 80s reinvented Sabbath, Ozzy. I think this is a unique career path, and this is why there will never be somebody else like Ozzy. He is more than the grandfather of heavy metal.
Yeah.
He's to heavy metal what Elvis was for rock and roll.
I was explaining that to my kids, and I was saying, have you guys heard of the Beatles? Yes. Have you heard of John Lennon? Yes. Well, Ozzy, the Black Sabbath are the Beatles of heavy metal, and Ozzy very well might be the John Lennon figure minus the writing, and maybe he's the Ringo figure. The Ringo figure, I don't know, but all four of the Beatles are equally important, and all four members of Black Sabbath are equally important. And this is a lesson in something. In business, I've seen many a charismatic CEO with a great advisor and PR machine who's smart enough to surround him or herself by great people, a great VP of marketing, a great VP of operations, a great VP of everything else. And Ozzy is a great example of a charismatic figure whose advisor was smart enough to surround him by people who were great at what they do, be they Bob Daisley or Lee Kerslake or Randy Rhoads or Jakey Lee or Zach Wilde or Gus G or Joe Holmes, you name the person, Randy Castillo, Phil Soussan. It's just a brilliant exercise in, I think Ozzy understood and Sharon understood that Ozzy's true talent was his charisma. And there's just, I remember seeing Robert Plant live for the first time with my wife. And we kind of agreed that there's just certain people in this world that when they walk onto a stage or come into a room, they're just the center of attention. There's just something about them that makes them the center of attention. And Ozzy, for better or worse, is just one of those people that when he walked onto a stage or walked into a room, you couldn't help but look at him. Was he a great songwriter? No. Was he a great musician? No. But, it says a lot about intangibles. Ozzy might be the greatest intangible of all time, because I cannot put my finger on what his talent is other than charisma. But it's that charisma that made him so beloved to us. And I really do feel like I lost my weird uncle today. And I was, it's rare that I'm stopped in my tracks. And, today I was stopped in my tracks. With Eddie Van Halen, I was stopped in my tracks. With Neil Peart, I was stopped in my tracks. Lemmy, I was expecting. Dio, I was expecting. Maybe Malcolm Young was a surprise to me. But this is up there. This is really, really up there.
It's interesting how he bit off a dove's head at a press conference, right? He Bat comes up on stage, he rips the Bat's head off. A lot of artists would sort of get thrown in jail for stuff like this. Like, he got away with stuff too, right? Pees on the Alamo, gets arrested, but it seems like the more crazy stuff he did, the more his fans loved him for some reason. Where other artists, if they did the same sort of stunts, they would have been completely, their fan base would have vanished or evaporated. But somehow Ozzy still managed to get more fans by doing such things.
This is the part where I have split loyalties to Ozzy. This whole cartoon character Ozzy, biting the head off a bat, taking on televangelists, pranks, headline making. We can all agree that this was Sharon's making. But I always felt that the cartoon use, manipulation of the Ozzy character took away the credibility of what were amazing musicians surrounding him. And this is what I find sad, is that people remember, oh yeah, the guy who bit off the head of a bat. Oh yeah, the guy who took a leak outside the Alamo. I went to the Alamo, by the way. I used the bathroom. Great. But
they have good bathroom facilities over there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, 19th century, but they still work. But the point is, he is such an unusual character that I never felt that Sharon should have taken him down that road. And I'll point to the televangelist. I remember extremely well when Ozzy Osbourne, Iron Maiden, Kiss, AC/DC were all portrayed at around the same time in the early 80s as forces of evil that needed to be fought. And at one point, Ozzy, Sharon, invited, I think, a whole bunch of religious figures to one of his shows to show, you see, all I do is scream and sing songs with silly lyrics. I'm not the devil. And I remember the priest and the religious figures is walking up. Yeah, we didn't see no devil, just very loud heavy metal. So there was a part of the rock and roll marketing in that era that was afraid of the bad press. Sharon manipulated the bad press and turned it into a good press while not making any enemies. Great marketing.
And that's brilliant, Stefan. That's
brilliant.
At the end of the day, the reason why my mother knows who Ozzy Osbourne is, and the reason why our friends who didn't like heavy metal, the reason why they knew who Ozzy Osbourne was because of these things. So you had this group of people like us who loved Ozzy because of Blizzard of Oz and because of Randy Rhoads and because of Diary of a Madman, because of Jakey Lee. But then you also had this group of people who might not have been fans, but who had an awareness and a curiosity about Ozzy Osbourne because he bit the head off a bat and he bit the head off a dove and he peed on the Alamo and because he took on Jimmy Swaggart. So, you know, Elvis had the Colonel and Ozzy had Sharon.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, it was Sharon's idea for the Osbournes. It was Sharon who got him out of the hotel room, you know, to get him to put together a solo band. It was Sharon who booked the shows, booked the tours. She was a tour manager. She was the manager, and she slugged it out in those first few years when they weren't bringing in the big dollars. So, hats off to
guys, if we're calling this show Legacy of a Madman, okay, we're talking about all this stuff, but let's take it back to music. Like I just published on my socials my selected Ozzy playlist, and to our point about Ozzy and Sabbath, my Sabbath selected Ozzy playlist was about 24 songs. Yeah, I could name whole albums, but it was 24 great songs. My Ozzy solo playlist was about close to 40 songs, and there's gold there, guys. And yes, there's Crazy Train and Mom, I'm Coming Home and that stuff. But there's Bloodbath in Paradise, and there's I Just Want You.
But Perrin, everything you're saying, you nailed it. And let me just get into this deeper. Ozzy is not talentless. He's got a voice that has been imitated by thousands of singers. You could just keep going through bands that want to sound Doom. They want to sound like Ozzy. Even Rob Halford does little Ozzy bits in his voice on a couple of songs. Listen to Electric Eye. It sounds like Ozzy. He's doing his imitation of Ozzy. I'm saying that Ozzy had a unique golden voice, just like Dio had a voice. He might not have been as technical, but man, he had a voice that everyone sort of could relate to. And it was a mainstream voice, and it was a Doom voice, and it was a heavy metal voice. It was somewhere where everybody could identify with.
And it was a unique voice, because when we were doing the Sabbath final show review, we were saying, the performance of some of the singers proved how hard some of these songs are to sing.
Exactly.
Because some of them were able to do a good job, but some of them really struggled. And we're not talking about hitting glass-shattering high notes.
That's right.
We're not talking about a unique, deep baritone voice. We were just talking about just a very unique tone and a very unique delivery that, even though you've heard it 100 times, 1,000 of times, you just can't do it because you're not that person. So, again, unique.
And I'm just going to add one more thing. People think songwriting is only lyrics and music. It's also melody. That's the definition of songwriting. And Ozzy brought the melody to all those songs. So yes, Geezer Butler wrote the lyrics. Yes, Tony Iommi did the riffs, but Ozzy brought the melody. And without the melody, you can't hum it during a campfire. Without a melody, you can't sing it to your friend. What was that song again? I couldn't remember the lyrics, but here it goes like this. So the melody is songwriting. Sorry, Steve.
But as far as I'm concerned, Ozzy put out his first 3 albums. I mean, Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, Bark at the Moon. As far as I'm concerned, they are 80s metal essentials. Yes. I was never that crazy about The Ultimate Sin, and as far as I'm concerned, it all went down from No Rest for the Wicked on. But that's my take. For me, music is associated with eras of my life, how I enjoyed it back then. Blizzard of Oz is an album that I played and played and played when I was 14 years old, blasting it in my headphones, non-stop. Ozzy at Théâtre Saint-Denis, his very first solo tour with Randy Rhoads in Montreal in 1981. I mean, I remember I had seats in 5th or 6th row, but then people rushed the stage at the beginning. So I ended up leaning against the stage in front of Randy Rhoads. When Ozzy jumped on stage, he high-fived everyone on the front row, including myself, and he was very convincing. The show was short, 80 minutes, encore included. Thank you, good night. Whenever Ozzy comes to, I know there was one tour where he played for a long time.
3 hours, yeah.
Yeah, but an average Ozzy show
The
was
Hound.
12 songs.
Ozzy lived, and I think again this might have been Sharon. The old adage, "Leave them wanting more." For the Ozzy shows were notoriously short, an hour 20 minutes, 13 songs, and I really do think that was leave them wanting more, leave them hungry, leave them wanting to see you the next time you come to town. I really think that was another thing that was concocted.
And people, and this is not a guy who reinvented the wheel on stage. It was always the same thing. Pour buckets of water on his head, do the hands like this, go fucking crazy, Montreal, go
The frog
crazy,
jump,
Toronto, go fucking
and
crazy, Calgary. It was always the same thing. But had he not done it, we would have been disappointed. That was his act. That's who he was on stage. It was very, like, every time I went to see Ozzy Osbourne, probably a dozen times, it was always the same thing in the end. I said, oh, God, this act again. And
But
I'm
Stefan,
always laughing, and I always wanted to go back.
Steph, I remember I took a girl to, I think it was the No Rest for the Wicked tour, and it was the first time she saw Ozzy, and she said to me, and when she was going home, she's like, Ozzy loved me twice and he blessed me 3 times. And she was so happy that Ozzy loved her twice and blessed her 3 times. And, I didn't want to tell her I'd been blessed by Ozzy like 15 times in my life because I've seen him so many times or whatever. But, yeah, it was part of the shtick that, like, Ozzy loved me and God bless you all. And people, and, we all got doused with the water. And, we saw the frog stomp. And it's fine, it was this part, it's like that warm old embrace, like it's everything seemed right in the world, Maybe the show was canceled a couple times and rescheduled because that was
he will go down as he is the Elvis of hard rock and metal. He will go down as the John Lennon of hard rock and metal.
Elvis, John Lennon, I agree.
He's
my only regret for Ozzy is that after Black Sabbath did their farewell tour, I think Ozzy should have stopped there. Ordinary Man, Patient Number 9, they did not add anything to his discography. They seemed like programmed in advance by other people, and Ozzy, come here, put your voice there, thank you, good night, we'll take care of the rest. I didn't feel that he was very involved towards the end. It was more of a marketing tool. I think his last
but
two albums were...
Stefan, we're hardcore. We're like hardcore Ozzy fans, first 3-4 albums. But you know what? There was a new generation that did like Patient Number 9, and there was a generation that was hungry for that new music, and they did appreciate it. Maybe it wasn't us because we're a little more hardcore, but there is a lot of people out there that they're happy. Even at the age he was at, he's doing something, right? So hats off to him, guys. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, this is show number 2 today on Ozzy Osbourne because he was so special in all our lives. All the music. I think I counted 20 with the Sabbath albums, 28 albums with his solo albums. I mean, that's a lot of music, man. It's a friggin' lot of music. And so, like, Perrin, what you were saying, was it 20 Black Sabbath songs and 30 Ozzy songs?
Yeah, I mean, when I was just making a playlist, there was frankly more Ozzy songs on it than Sabbath songs. And,
but add the Sabbath ones, add the Sabbath ones to the Ozzy ones. That's a friggin' lot of songs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like people are saying, oh, let's publish our top 10 songs Ozzy sang on. Top 10. How do you do a top 10? Like a top 10, you that runs out really quick with the Sabbath output and just Ozzy's first 2 solo albums. So there's not that many artists where you can go this deep,
God bless Ozzy Osbourne.
My only regret is not seeing the Black Sabbath reunion during the Ozfest years. I did see a reunited Sabbath with the 13 tour and the farewell tour. And I truly wish I had seen the real thing in the 70s. but I was too young.
Yeah.
But look, we lost a great man today, a great entertainer, a great heavy metal figurehead, a great inspiration, and we might never get another Ozzy.
A cultural icon. We lost a cultural icon today, frankly. A heavy
Absolutely.
metal pillar and a cultural icon is what was
Yeah.
lost today.
Yeah. That's why
I would call him the anti-Sean Cassidy.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you don't like Sean Cassidy?
Nope.
The Do Run Run? Was it the Do Run Run?
Nope.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Thank you for taking your time. I know, Stefan, you're having your supper there because we caught you last second, but we appreciate you jumping on. Much appreciated. Merci beaucoup, Anne, for letting Stefan jump on.
It's quite all right. Bat meat is great meat.
That's right. Barrett, thanks so much, man.